Rain poured onto a silent grave, a billionaire's name carved in cold stone, and beside it stood a young maid, crying as if her entire world had been buried beneath the earth. No family came, no business partners, just her, trembling, whispering words no one else could hear. But what if the man she was mourning wasn't really dead? Backhand index pointing right before we begin. Comment where you're watching from, and subscribe if powerful stories of loyalty, truth, and hidden justice move your heart, because this story will stay with you until the very end. Sarah learned early that survival meant becoming invisible. In a mansion where crystal chandeliers sparkled and marble floors echoed with power, she moved like a shadow, head down, footsteps soft, eyes trained on the ground. She was the maid no one remembered hiring and no one bothered thanking. Orders were thrown at her like scraps. Mistakes, real or imagined, became excuses for humiliation. Words cut deeper than chores ever could. But Sarah swallowed them all in silence. She cleaned rooms larger than the house she grew up in. She served meals she was never allowed to taste. Laughter followed her sometimes, sharp and cruel, as if her existence itself was a joke. If a glass went missing, eyes turned to her. If something broke, blame landed at her feet. She never defended herself, not because she was weak, but because she had learned that dignity sometimes meant enduring quietly. Except one man noticed. Thomas Bellogan, the billionaire owner of the mansion, was rarely present. Yet when he was, the air changed. He didn't shout. He didn't boast. And unlike everyone else, he looked at Sarah as if she were human, not a servant, not a burden, a person. Sometimes he'd pause as she passed, nodding politely. Sometimes he'd thank her, just one word, but it stayed with her for days. One evening, a priceless watch disappeared. Panic erupted. Voices rose. Fingers pointed. Sarah was dragged into the room, accused without proof, her name spoken like a verdict. She stood there, trembling but silent, eyes lowered as always. Then Thomas spoke, calmly, firmly, without raising his voice. "Has anyone seen evidence?" he asked. Silence followed. He looked at Sarah, not with suspicion but certainty. "I trust her," he said simply. "That's enough." The room froze. Accusations dissolved. Sarah was dismissed without another word. That night, alone in the staff quarters, she cried. Not from pain this time, but from something unfamiliar. For the first time, someone had seen her. After that night, something inside Sarah shifted. Quietly, cautiously, like a candle lit in a room long used to darkness. Nothing in the mansion changed on the surface. The order still came sharp. The laughter still followed her down the halls. The work was just as heavy, but now, buried beneath the routine and the silence, there was a fragile warmth she didn't know how to name. Thomas Bellogan began noticing her in ways that felt deliberate. It started small, almost unremarkable to anyone else. One morning, as Sarah placed a tray of tea on his desk, he looked up from his papers and said, "Thank you." Not distracted, not automatic. He meant it. The words caught her off guard so completely that she froze, unsure she'd heard correctly. She whispered, "You're welcome, sir," and left the room with her heart racing. Days later, he asked her something no one ever had. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Sarah, sir." "Thank you, Sarah," he replied, as if the name mattered. For her, it changed everything. Being seen didn't erase the cruelty around her, but it softened its edges. When insults came, they no longer defined her. When blame drifted her way, she stood a little straighter. Someone in this house knew who she was. Someone believed in her, without demanding proof. And for the first time, Sarah allowed herself to imagine a life where she was more than invisible. Thomas, on the other hand, was learning something he hadn't expected. Surrounded by executives who praised him loudly and smiled with practiced loyalty, he found himself watching a maid who asked for nothing. Sarah worked with care even when no one was watching. She returned lost items without reward. She absorbed cruelty without becoming cruel herself. In a world built on contracts and calculations, her quiet integrity unsettled him. She became his silent measure of truth. When deals felt wrong, He thought of her bowed head and steady hands. When people promised loyalty, he compared their words to Sarah's actions. Without knowing it, she reminded him of the man he once wanted to be, before wealth complicated everything. Sometimes their conversations were no more than a few sentences exchanged in passing, sometimes just a nod. But something unspoken grew between them, not romance, not ambition. Something rarer, mutual respect, human recognition. Yet hope, once born, is dangerous. Sarah knew better than to dream. Hope had hurt her before. Still, it slipped into her heart like sunlight through a cracked window. She began to believe that kindness could exist without a price, that dignity could survive in places built to crush it. And Thomas, watching her walk away one evening, felt a quiet resolve settle in his chest. Whatever happened next, he would protect that light. Neither of them realized that this fragile hope, so gentle, so human, was about to change both their lives forever. The news broke like thunder. A private car, a sudden explosion, no survivors. By nightfall, every channel repeated the same words. Billionaire Thomas Bellogon confirmed dead in a mysterious incident. Analysts debated causes. Rivals issued polished statements of shock. Markets trembled. The world mourned loudly. Inside the mansion, chaos unfolded with rehearsed precision. Executives arrived in black suits, their grief perfectly timed for cameras. Distant relatives appeared overnight, faces Sarah had never seen, each carrying tears that dried the moment they turned away. Lawyers whispered. Assistants scrambled. Flowers flooded the halls, filling the air with a sweetness that felt almost suffocating. Yet something was missing. The house felt hollow. Thomas's office remained locked, untouched, like a paused heartbeat. His chair sat empty. His voice, calm, steady, human, was gone. And no matter how many people cried in public rooms, none of it felt real, except to Sarah. When she heard the news, she didn't scream. She didn't faint. She simply stood still, her hands trembling around a cleaning cloth, as if the world had tilted and forgotten to stop. For a moment, she thought it had to be a mistake. Men like Thomas didn't just vanish. They didn't disappear without a word. But the truth pressed in quickly and without mercy. He was gone that night, long after the mansion fell silent. Sarah sat alone on her narrow bed in the staff quarters. The walls felt closer than ever. Memories flooded her, small ones. Him saying her name. Him defending her without anger. Him thanking her for work no one else noticed. Tears came quietly. No sobs. No witnesses. She mourned not the billionaire the world talked about, but the man who had seen her when no one else had. The funeral was everything money could buy. Black cars lined the road. Security blocked the gates. Media hovered at a distance, lenses hungry for grief. A polished coffin rested beside a freshly carved gravestone bearing Thomas Bellogon's name, etched deep, permanent, unquestioned. Sarah wasn't invited. She watched from far away as important people spoke into microphones, praising Thomas's vision, his power, his success. Each word felt rehearsed. Each tear seemed to ask for something in return. When it was over and the crowd dispersed, Sarah returned to work. No one noticed the red in her eyes. No one asked how she felt. They never did. That evening, when rain began to fall, slow, cold, relentless, Sarah made a decision she couldn't explain, even to herself. She waited until the mansion slept, then slipped out quietly, wrapping her thin coat tighter around her shoulders. She walked through empty streets, through the weight of loss pressing heavier with every step, until she reached the cemetery. The grave was new, the earth still dark and raw. Flowers lay scattered, already wilting beneath the rain. The name on the stone glistened under gray skies. Thomas Bellogon. Sarah stood there for a long time, unsure what to do. No one was watching. No reward waited. No one would ever know she came. Then her knees gave way. She sank to the ground, rain soaking her hair, her clothes, her skin. And the tears she had been holding back finally broke free. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice shaking. "I never thanked you properly." Her hands pressed into the wet soil as if the earth itself could hear her. "You didn't have to be kind," she said softly. "But you were. When everyone else treated me like nothing, you made me feel human." Her shoulders shook as the rain fell harder. "I hope you knew," she continued, choking back sobs, "that it mattered, that you mattered." There were no cameras, no applause, just a young maid crying at a billionaire's grave, mourning a man the world claimed to love, but never truly knew. She stayed until the rain numbed her fingers and the sky began to darken. Only then did she rise, wiping her face, whispering a final goodbye before walking back into the night, alone again. Or so she believed. From a distance, hidden beneath an umbrella, a man watched in silence. His hair was darker now, his posture different, his face partially shadowed. To the world, Thomas Bellogon was dead, ashes in a closed coffin, a name on stone. But his eyes were very much alive. He had watched the funeral, the speeches, the crowds. He had seen who came early and who left quickly, who cried for the cameras, who smiled the moment they thought no one was looking. And then he had seen Sarah. No invitation, no audience, no reward, just grief. As she knelt in the rain, something tightened in Thomas's chest. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Truth. In that moment, standing unseen, Thomas understood everything he needed to know. Who loved him for power, who respected him for money, and who mourned him simply because he was gone. The rain continued to fall as Sarah disappeared down the path, never once looking back. Thomas remained where he was, breath slow, heart heavy, but certain the experiment was over. The truth had revealed itself. An invisible girl had just proven she was the most loyal soul he had ever known. Thomas Bellogon had been buried for less than 2 weeks when the knives came out. The mansion that once echoed with careful politeness transformed into a battlefield of whispered threats and sharpened smiles. Lawyers replaced mourners. Relatives who had barely known Thomas's habits suddenly claimed to understand his true wishes. Executives argued behind closed doors. Every conversation circled the same word like vultures over carrion. Money. Portraits of Thomas still hung on the walls, but no one looked at his eyes anymore. His memory had become an obstacle, something to step over on the way to inheritance. And standing in the middle of it all, unnoticed as ever, was Sarah. At first, the cruelty was subtle. Her workload doubled, then tripled. Orders contradicted each other, and when she failed to meet the impossible, voices rose. Accusations slipped into casual conversation. Things have been going missing lately. Staff like her always steal eventually. Watch her. Sarah felt it immediately. The shift. The mansion no longer merely ignored her. It hunted her. She moved carefully, quietly, as she always had. She returned every misplaced item she found. She kept her eyes down. Her heart, still bruised from grief, clung stubbornly to one truth. Thomas believed in me. That belief became her armor. But armor is thin when greed decides to strike. It happened on a gray morning, heavy with tension. 2 security guards approached her as she scrubbed the marble near the west wing. They didn't look at her kindly. They didn't explain gently. They escorted her to the study. Inside, several members of the Bellogon family sat stiffly, men and women dressed in black silk and impatience. On the desk lay an open velvet case, a missing heirloom necklace, priceless, untraceable, perfect. "Explain this," one of them said coldly. Sarah stared at the necklace, confusion flooding her face. I've never seen it before," she said truthfully. The accusation felt like a sentence already decided. She was working near the vault. She's always lingering. She has motive. Motive. Sarah wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but fear locked her throat. She looked around the room, searching instinctively for one calm voice, one steady presence. Thomas's chair was empty. "I didn't take it," she said again, stronger this time. "I swear." They didn't listen. Her staff locker was searched. Her small bag dumped onto floor. When nothing appeared, irritation replaced patience. "Then you must have hidden it," someone snapped. Security closed in. A contract was shoved toward her, already filled out. Confession. Immediate termination. No police involvement. Asterisk if asterisk she cooperated. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the pen. All it would take was a lie. One sentence she didn't believe. Her job would be gone either way, but the lie would destroy the only thing she had left, her dignity. "I won't sign," she said quietly. The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Insults flew freely now. Ungrateful, thief, traitor. They reminded her of her place, of how easily she could be crushed. She stood there, small but unbending. "I didn't steal anything," she repeated. "And I won't say I did." That was enough. She was escorted out within minutes. No farewell. No apology. Her belongings, 2 changes of clothes and a worn photograph, were placed in a box and handed to her at the gate like a final humiliation. The door she had entered through every morning for years closed behind her with a dull, final sound. Just like that, Sarah lost everything. Her job, her shelter, her last connection to the man who had changed her life. She stood outside the gates for a long moment, the mansion looming behind her like a monument to injustice. Rain threatened again. Her hands were numb, not from cold, but from shock. Still, she didn't cry. Not yet. She walked, with nowhere to go. She moved through the city until her feet ached and the sky darkened. By nightfall, she found a cheap room above a closed shop. Thin walls, flickering lights, a mattress that smelled of dust and old sorrow. She sat on the edge of the bed and finally let the tears come. Not loud, not dramatic, just pain spilling over. "I didn't lie," she whispered into the empty room, as if someone needed to hear it. "I didn't." The next days were harder. Without references, no one wanted to hire her. The rumors had spread faster than truth ever could. She ate little. She slept less. Each night, she clutched the memory of Thomas's calm voice like a lifeline. "I trust her." That sentence kept her standing. What Sarah didn't know, what no one suspected, was that she was not as alone as she believed. From a quiet office across the city, Thomas Bellogon watched everything unfold. Hidden behind legal walls and false death certificates, he observed with painful clarity. He listened to recordings, read reports, studied footage from security cameras he alone still controlled. He watched his family tear into his legacy without a shred of restraint. He watched them lie, and when Sarah was accused, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened. He had expected greed. He had prepared for betrayal. But this was cruelty. He saw her refuse to sign confession, saw her stand straight while they tried to break her, saw her leave with nothing but the truth intact. And in that moment, something settled inside him, cold and unyielding. They had crossed a line. From the shadows, Thomas moved pieces into place. Accounts were traced, conversations recorded, every false claim carefully preserved. The necklace, he discovered, had been planted, part of a larger scheme to quietly eliminate the last loose end. The maid who knew too much kindness. The maid who reminded him who he really was. As Sarah struggled to survive in silence, Thomas prepared, not for revenge fueled by anger, but for justice guided by truth. And soon, very soon, the people who would value money over memory would learn exactly what it cost to betray the only person who had loved without reward. A week later, Sarah returned to the cemetery, not because she had nowhere else to go, though that was true, but because the weight in her chest refused to lift. The city had taken everything from her except one thing, the truth. And there was only one place where she felt safe enough to speak it out loud. The grave looked the same. Cold stone, fading flowers, silence. Sarah knelt slowly, her knees pressing into the damp ground. The wind brushed past her like a whisper. She folded her hands, not in prayer, but in honesty. "I lost everything," she said softly. "They said I stole. They threw me away like I was nothing." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "I could have lied," she continued. "I could have begged. But I remembered you. I remember how you looked at me like I mattered, so I told the truth, even when it cost me everything." Tears slid down her cheeks, but her posture remained steady. "You were the only one who ever believed in me," she whispered. "And I don't know what this feeling is, but I know it's real. Not because you were rich, not because you were powerful, but because you were kind. She placed her palm against the stone. I loved you, she admitted, in the quiet way, in the way that asked for nothing back. Behind a line of trees, unseen and unmoving, Thomas Bellogon stood frozen. Every word struck deeper than any betrayal he had witnessed. This was not loyalty earned by money. This was love born from dignity, from recognition, from humanity, and it had survived his death. As Sarah wiped her tears and slowly stood, Thomas turned away, because if he stayed any longer, he would reveal himself too soon. Back in the shadows, the work continued. Evidence was no longer suspicion. It was fact. The planted necklace traced to a family member's private safe. Altered security logs restored. Audio recordings of conversations once whispered now laid bare. Lawyers who had smiled at the funeral now spoke carefully into phones, unaware their words were being archived. Sarah's name was quietly cleared, first in internal files, then in sealed affidavits. Protection followed. A legal shield she never saw, but felt. The rumors stopped. The doors that had closed began to open again. She didn't know why. She only knew that for the first time since being thrown out of the mansion, the world seemed to hesitate before hurting her again. And inside that hesitation, a shift was happening. The powerful believed the past was buried. They believed the grave had closed a chapter. They believed truth could be silenced by stone and signatures. They were wrong, because some truths cannot be buried, some loyalty cannot be erased, and some justice, once awakened, does not ask permission. As storm clouds gathered far beyond the city, Thomas Bellogon looked at the final report laid out before him. Everything was ready. The reckoning was coming, and this time it would be undeniable. Sarah walked away from the mansion, carrying nothing but her dignity, and that proved to be more valuable than any fortune. She found work she could be proud of, a small home she could call hers, and a life rebuilt on honesty and self-respect, not charity. Meanwhile, Thomas prepared to return, not to punish, but to set the record straight. The mansion, the family, the greed, they would all face what they had sown. And through it all, Sarah remained untouched by bitterness, her loyalty a quiet power that no money could buy. Because some truths cannot be silenced. Loyalty whispered in silence is louder than greed shouted in power. Backhand index pointing right if the story touched you. Like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes the quietest hearts carry the greatest truth.